Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be talking about the power of curiosity, and we're diving deep into Ian Leslie's book, Curious: The Desire to Know and Why Your Future Depends on It. It's amazing how relevant this topic is for all you learners out there, especially in today's world. The book opens with a story about a 10-year-old boy. His name is Brian, and he almost shoots himself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because he finds a gun in his parents' dresser drawer, and he just has to see how it works. Talk about curiosity nearly killing the cat.
It's a gripping story, and it really highlights the two types of curiosity that Leslie describes in the book, diversive and epistemic. So Brian's initial urge to pick up the gun, that's pure, unadulterated, diversive curiosity. It's driven by novelty. It's kind of like when you're scrolling through social media, just clicking on whatever catches your eye.
Or channel surfing back in the day.
Exactly.
But how does that turn into epistemic curiosity, the deeper kind?
Well, think about those times you get sucked into a Wikipedia rabbit hole, or you spend hours researching something for a project. That's epistemic curiosity, that hunger to truly understand, to go beyond the surface. And for Brian, that moment with the gun, as terrifying as it was, it actually sparked a lifelong fascination with firearms, leading him to become a police officer.
Wow, that's wild. It really shows how even a single experience can ignite that deeper curiosity. But isn't it kind of scary to think that sometimes our desire for novelty can lead us down dangerous paths?
It's true. There's a certain impulsivity to diversive curiosity that we need to be mindful of. But Leslie argues that it's this very drive for novelty that has propelled human progress throughout history.
Okay, so let's talk about the history of curiosity. I have to admit, this is the part where I'm like, all right, time for a coffee break. But the way Leslie presents it in Curious is actually fascinating.
It's quite a journey. Did you know that the ancient Greeks actually considered curiosity a virtue? Thinkers like Aristotle saw it as fundamental to learning and discovery. But then, fast forward to the rise of the Catholic Church, and suddenly curiosity is viewed with suspicion, even as a sin.
Wait, seriously, so wanting to know things was considered bad? That's crazy. What was their reasoning?
Well, figures like St. Augustine saw curiosity as a form of pride, a distraction from faith. But then, Thomas Aquinas comes along and offers a slightly different perspective. He distinguishes between aimless curiosity, which he still considered problematic, and a directed pursuit of truth, which he saw as valuable.
So it's not about curiosity itself being good or bad, but rather the intention behind it.
Exactly. And this tension between celebrating and suppressing curiosity has continued throughout history. The Renaissance, of course, was a period of incredible intellectual curiosity, fueled by the invention of the printing press. Leslie calls this the age of questions, a time when access to information exploded, and people were eager to explore new ideas.
That makes sense. With the knowledge becoming more widespread, it's natural that people would start asking more questions. But wasn't access to that information still limited to certain groups?
Unfortunately, yes. Even with the printing press, literacy and access to books were still largely restricted to the elite. So curiosity began to become polarized along socioeconomic lines, creating a divide that still exists today.
That's such an important point. It makes me wonder. With the internet giving us instant access to pretty much any information we could want, are we actually becoming more curious? Or are we just overwhelmed by the sheer volume of it all?
That's the million-dollar question. Leslie argues that we're actually living in the age of answers, where instant gratification is killing our deeper curiosity.
But how can that be? With all this information at our fingertips, shouldn't we be more curious than ever?
Think about it. When you can Google any question and get an answer in seconds, do you even bother to think critically about the information you're consuming? Are you digging deeper, exploring different perspectives, or are you just accepting the first answer that pops up?
I think you're right. I find myself falling into that trap all the time. It's so easy to just skim the surface and move on without really engaging with the information in a meaningful way.
And that's what Leslie calls the curiosity divide. Those who are naturally inclined to be curious are thriving in this environment. They're using the internet as a tool for exploration and discovery. But for others, this constant influx of information can be paralyzing, leading to a decline in their natural curiosity.
So, in a way, the internet is both a blessing and a curse when it comes to curiosity. It's given us access to more information than we could ever dream of, but it's also made it easier than ever to be passive consumers of information, rather than active explorers.
Exactly. And that's why it's more important than ever to be intentional about cultivating our curiosity. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're uncovering some incredible insights from Ian Leslie's book, Curious.
Last time we talked about how this age of answers might actually be hurting our natural curiosity. But what I find really exciting is that Leslie doesn't just leave us with this bleak outlook. He actually makes a really strong case for why curiosity is so crucial in today's world, especially for all you lifelong learners out there.
Absolutely. He calls it the curiosity dividend, and it's all about the connection between curiosity and success, not just in school, but in your career too.
All right, give you the details. How does being curious actually help you succeed in the real world?
Well, Leslie highlights a ton of research that shows curiosity is a strong predictor of achievement. It's right up there with things like conscientiousness when it comes to factors that contribute to success in different parts of life.
So it's not just about being hardworking and organized, it's also about being curious and engaged with the world around you.
Exactly. And it makes perfect sense when you think about the skills that curiosity helps develop: problem solving, adaptability, creativity, critical thinking. All of these are fueled by curiosity.
I see what you mean. In a world that's constantly changing, those who are curious are naturally going to be more adaptable
Yeah.
and better equipped to handle those challenges.
Exactly. And Leslie points out how employers are really looking for people who have these skills. They need people who can think outside the box, come up with innovative solutions, and aren't afraid to ask questions.
So it's not just about having the right skills anymore, it's about having that underlying curiosity and a hunger for continuous learning and growth.
Absolutely. And here's the best part. Leslie doesn't just tell us that curiosity is important, he actually gives us tons of tips on how to cultivate it and make it stronger.
Okay, now we're talking. I'm all ears. What are some of those strategies?
One of the most interesting things he says is that having a strong knowledge base is actually key to being more curious. It might sound a little counterintuitive, but the more you know, the more you realize what you don't know. And that's when the really interesting questions start to pop up.
Yeah, it's like that saying, the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know. I
Yeah.
totally get that. Every time I start learning about something new, it's like it opens up all these new questions and possibilities I never even thought about before.
Exactly. It's like you're building this mental scaffolding.
Mhm.
The more knowledge you have, the more connections you can make. And then your curiosity can branch out in all these amazing directions.
Okay, I'm starting to see how it all works together.
Hmm.
But how do we go from just having a lot of knowledge to actually being more curious every day?
Well, Leslie has some really great advice on how to become a better question asker. He says we need to move past those simple yes or no questions and start asking more open-ended questions, the kind that challenge assumptions and make you think more deeply.
I like that. It's so easy to think we have all the answers.
Mm,
But asking the right questions can really open our minds to new possibilities and different ways of seeing things. It's
yeah,
like the difference between just reading a textbook and having a real conversation with someone who has a totally different point of view.
exactly. And this brings us to one of the most useful parts of the book, where Leslie lays out his 7 ways to stay curious.
7 ways. Tell me more.
Okay, one of my favorites is Stay Foolish. He talks about iconic figures like Walt Disney and Steve Jobs. They were never afraid to go against the grain and try new things, even if those ideas seemed a little crazy at first.
That's so inspiring. It reminds me that sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from people who think differently, people who aren't afraid of the unknown. It's like having that childlike sense of wonder and not being scared to look silly or make mistakes.
Exactly. Another principle I really liked is forage, like a foxhog.
Forage like a fox.
Did I?
I don't get it.
It's actually a really clever analogy. Leslie says that we should try to be specialists in our fields, just like hedgehogs who know their burrows really well. But at the same time, we should also be curious like foxes, exploring other areas and bringing those ideas back to our work.
Okay, I love that. It's about having that depth and breadth in our learning, being experts in one area, but also having all these other interests and using those interests to deepen our understanding.
Exactly. It's about being open to new ideas and connections, even if they seem totally unrelated to our main area of expertise.
So instead of staying in our comfort zones, we should be venturing out, looking around, and bringing back all sorts of cool things to share.
Exactly. And this leads us to another important principle: turn puzzles into mysteries. Remember those 2 types of curiosity we talked about before?
Diversive and epistemic.
Yeah. This principle is all about going beyond just finding a quick answer to a question, like solving a puzzle, and instead thinking about it as a mystery, something we can keep exploring and learning from.
So instead of just being satisfied with this simple explanation, we should keep asking why and how, and digging deeper to really understand the complexities.
Exactly. It's about having that insatiable desire to understand. Keep asking questions, even when you think you've already found the answer. That's what really sets curious minds apart.
This is all so interesting. I'm feeling inspired to try out some of these principles myself. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been talking about Ian Leslie's book, Curious, and how important curiosity is for learning and growth.
We've covered a lot of ground already, like those two different types of curiosity, and how people's views on curiosity have changed throughout history. But there's one part of the book that really blew me away. It's how Leslie connects curiosity to conflict resolution.
Conflict resolution.
Yeah, it might sound kind of strange, but it totally makes sense when you think about it.
Okay, you've got my attention. Tell me more.
Well, Leslie has a whole chapter on this called Ask the Big Why, and he talks about how important curiosity was in some really high-stakes negotiations, like the Northern Ireland peace process.
Wow, that's a pretty intense example.
It is. He even brings in examples from Jonathan Powell. He was Tony Blair's chief negotiator at the time.
That's fascinating. So how did curiosity actually play a role in those talks? It seems like everyone would be so focused on their own side that curiosity would be the last thing on their minds.
I know, right? But Powell talks about how asking why was so crucial. It wasn't about trying to win the argument or force the other side to give up. It was about really trying to understand where they were coming from, their motivations, their fears, their goals.
So instead of just arguing about their differences, they were trying to understand the deeper reasons behind those differences.
Exactly. And Leslie points to research that shows that when people approach these situations with curiosity, when they're genuinely interested in understanding each other, they're much more likely to find creative solutions and make real progress, even in those long-standing conflicts that seem impossible to resolve.
That's amazing. So curiosity isn't just about learning new things for yourself. It's also a powerful tool for connecting with other people.
Absolutely. And what's really cool is that this applies to all our relationships, not just those big political negotiations, but also our everyday conversations with colleagues, friends, family. When we come to those conversations wanting to understand, instead of judge or argue, it can totally change those relationships for the better.
Yeah, it's like instead of immediately getting defensive, we can actually be curious about why the other person sees things differently.
Exactly. It's about realizing that everyone has their own unique experiences, and those experiences have shaped their beliefs. So instead of just saying they're wrong, we can use curiosity to build understanding and connection.
That's such a powerful idea. It really shows how important curiosity is.
Now, remember all those practical tips Leslie gives us for nurturing our curiosity?
Yeah.
Well, one that I found really helpful is be a thinker.
A thinker, what's that all about?
It's about finding that balance between thinking about ideas and actually trying things out in the real world. Leslie uses Benjamin Franklin as an example. He was obviously a brilliant thinker, but he was also an inventor, a scientist, a statesman. He was always tinkering, experimenting, putting his ideas into action.
So it's about being hands-on, not just thinking about things, but actually trying them out.
Exactly. And this connects back to what we were saying earlier about having a good knowledge base. Franklin had all this knowledge about so many different things, but he didn't stop there. He wanted to see how those ideas worked in practice.
That's so true. It's when we can apply what we learn that it really sticks.
Now, here's something that might surprise you. Curiosity can pop up in the most unexpected places. Leslie even has a chapter called Question Your Teaspoons.
Question my teaspoons.
I know, it sounds weird, but it's all about having that sense of wonder, like a child, seeing the amazing in the ordinary. He says that even everyday objects, like teaspoons, can become really fascinating if we just take the time to really look at them, to ask questions about them, to think about their history and what they mean.
That's a really interesting way to think about it. I guess we get so caught up in our busy lives that we forget to appreciate the little things.
That's exactly what Leslie is saying. He says that this practice of questioning everything, even the things that seem boring, can actually make our lives so much richer.
It's like rediscovering the joy of learning. Not because we have to, but because we want to.
That's a great way to put it, and I think that's really what Ian Leslie's book, Curious, is all about. It's a reminder that curiosity is such a powerful force. It can help us learn and grow, build stronger relationships, and make the world a better place.
Yeah, I totally agree. This has been such a fascinating conversation, and it's really made me think about how I can be more curious in my own life.
And for all of you listening out there, we want to hear from you. What are you curious about? If you could explore any topic in the world, what would it be and why?
That's a great question to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into curiosity. Remember, the future belongs to the curious.